Our guest for today is highlighting his own charity, HAL Charities, Building Homes, Building Futures. Gary Jonas of HAL Property Group believes that one of the ways to have great success in business is by building strong relationships at the workplace through highlighting individual strengths and understanding the importance of happiness. Goal-driven by a strong set of values such as positive attitude, doing whatever it takes to get the job done, the HAL Group has over 600 units that they have developed into residential and mixed-use buildings. Creating vibrant communities throughout the Philadelphia area, HAL Properties continues to take the city by storm. Stay tuned. Hey, Gary, thanks for joining us today on Trusted Connections. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Oh, wonderful. Glad to have you. So give us a little breakdown of how you got started in the business.
Sure. I started in the business. I was in the residential mortgage business. And, through that process, I got an opportunity to take a lot of applications and see what people were doing to make money and where they were creating, wealth, and kind of realized that without super high level, doctorate degrees and, the best way to do that was to do it in real estate. And so my partners and I decided that we wanted to get in the real estate space. So in 2008, we started a small development company and, just got lucky that the timing was good. At the bottom of the market, not a lot of people were buying. There was a lot of inventory at really good pricing, and we were able to start to kind of build out a company from there. So it's been great. We've had a great run.
Now, did you initially start with just homes and then went into mixed use and multifamily, or how did you jump in?
Yeah, so we started by buying 2-3 unit buildings and just rehabbing them. Mm-hmm. As you would imagine, I think that's kind of, for people without a lot of money, that's the normal starting point, right? And then ironically, one of the big things that kind of helped us push the company forward is, my job was to do everything at the time. So I would find the properties and then my partner would fix them up and then I would rent them and take the maintenance calls and, all that fun stuff. And so one of our tenants called us and they had a leak in their apartment, and I'm in there trying to identify the leak and putting holes in the ceiling, like no idea what I'm doing. But through that process, I started talking to her and she said, I should introduce you to my boyfriend. He works on commercial real estate. So I said, that would be great. And she did. And he ended up showing us, well, this is how you do a 6-unit building and a 10-unit building, and really walking us through that process. And that, ironically, was the kind of turning point that took us from doing small little projects to, a 10-unit, then a 20-unit, then a 100-unit. Just as we started to understand the financial process behind it, we were able to kind of really accelerate what we did.
Yeah. How did you build your brand?
So I'm going to start with the name because we have an odd name, right? The HAL Group is a little bit odd, and people always ask me about it. And so we were in a boardroom for a bank, and they had a sign on the wall that said, "The answer is yes, let's figure out how." And so we loved it. We thought, oh, this is great. And people remember the name. It's kind of evocative. And then what we ended up doing, this was my big marketing idea, was I was going to create postcards that had a big question mark on it that said how. And then you would turn it over and say, let me show you how I can buy your house for cash. Let me, and all these stupid different one-liners. And we sent those postcards out. I didn't get any business from it, but
it got your name out, right? So
exactly, we got the name out of it, and we love it. So all good.
Yeah. Now, how? What was the vision that you started with, and how has that changed over the years?
So the vision that we started with was, I was a big Robert Kiyosaki fan, and so I was into cash flow and how to create passive income. And so the vision was to be able to retire by the time I was 45 from the cash flow that we had from the properties that we owned. And, based on what we had set out as the goal at that time, we were able to get there. We probably were a little not ambitious enough in the goal because we probably didn't understand how much inflation would be over that period of time and whatnot. But, we did kind of get to that goal. But I would tell you what's changed significantly for us is it's no longer for us about creating just cash flow for ourselves, which obviously is important, but it's more important to us that we've had a ton of people that have worked for us for, 10, 12, 15 years. And so what's been important is saying to them, hey, look, we've got to have a path and a system where we help create passive income and cash flow for you, right? So this isn't something that we just want to do for ourselves and then we turn around and we say, hey, thanks for working for us for X number of years. The idea is we want to build the next generation of people that are able to do this, and to take our employees who might not want to do it, just somebody in the accounting department, and get them financially literate and help them through the same process so everybody can create passive income.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way that I'm sure everyone has, been very thankful for when you teach as well as employ. How do you bring people up? What would you say is one of the ways that you try to help your employees to grow and learn more?
So the way that I think we try and help them grow and learn more is, it takes a lot of time, but we sit down with everybody individually every quarter. And part of that, we find out what their goals are outside of work, what their goals are inside of work, and then what their financial goals are. And then we try and help them on that path. And then, what that looks like is every quarter we have a company update. And so in that company update, we say, all right, well, how many people own an investment property? How many people have a plan for their own financial freedom? How many people have come to us with business ideas and we've started other companies? How many people have grown from one level to another management level? We keep a scorecard of that in every meeting just to say to people, hey, look, if these are what your goals are, we want you to have the opportunity to do that, and we want you to have the opportunity to do it here. So let's make sure everybody has it top of mind and understands what's available to them within the company.
What would you say is initially, since you talk to everybody about this quarterly, what would you say is the path that most people follow in terms of what they deem more important, fulfillment or financial success?
So that's a great question, right? And I think that we know the answer is fulfillment, but that the focus, in order to have fulfillment, the way I look at it is you've got to get to a base standard, which is, hey, not only can I pay my bills, but I can pay my bills and I got 6 months worth of reserves, right? So that's the first step in our process with everybody. Like once we get here, now we can talk about all the different things you want. So we have one person in our company that we call a dream maker, and his job is to help you no matter what you want to do. Hey, I want to learn to cook a 7-course meal. I want to learn this. Doesn't matter what it is. We want to help you get that fulfillment because we believe that stuff outside of work, we know that experiences are more important and create more happiness than, money does, right? Like, so at the end of the day, it's about experiences and living life to the fullest. And so we have that component as part of what we do. Now, the number of people that actually take advantage of that versus the financial freedom part isn't as much right now. And I think it's because it's harder to quantify. Mm-hmm. And it's harder for people to be willing to share their real hopes and dreams with you as much as you would like them to. So it's now,
having someone like that in the company, is that something that you had through other employers that you learned from and you were like, this is great, this is what I want to replicate? Or is it something that you saw a need for because, people now do place such importance on having a balance in life?
So I'd say it's more of the second, but more for selfish reasons, right? Which is I'm a pretty uncontent person at the end of the day for whatever reason. I'm always unhappy and want to create more. And so I started spending a lot of time on happiness, right? So there's a free class on Coursera called, that Yale teaches. It's a 10-week class on happiness, which apparently is their number one course they have at the school. And so I take that class. And as I take that class, I start to see, well, experiences are what people really care about. That's what's really going to create the most for them. And so I have a partner, Gary Rissler, who is tremendous at just helping people with that kind of stuff. So we said, hey, Riss, you got to do this, man, because if no matter how hard it is, if somebody tells you they want to do something, you're going to help them do it. And so we thought about it as a company. We saw it as an opportunity, and we had a person that could implement it. So I think we had all the right pieces there.
Yeah. So over the years, as you grow a company, I know there's a lot of expectations, that each individual, that runs the company have, and, things just don't always work out the way, everyone plans them to. How would you say you all best to cope with things, kind of going different directions and not panning out the way you had hoped they would?
So I think the first thing, and the thing that's most important, is for people to have to realize that you're going to be wrong 50% of the time, no matter what you do and how smart you are, right? And if you go in with the expectation that we've got to be open and honest with people, we've got to make decisions and then act quickly if those decisions don't work. So we've started companies because employees have come to us and said, hey, I think, so an example would be, we had the idea that we should get in the restoration business. We thought, oh, this is a high profit margin business. It's one that's scalable. It's recession proof. We should be in that business. We already do construction. This will be an easy kind of additional place for us to make some revenue. And so we tried it, and it didn't work. We couldn't figure out the scale of it, and we couldn't make it profitable enough for the effort that was required. And we ended up closing the business. Now, you might look at that as a bad thing, right? Like, oh, wow, this guy, he wanted to start a company, and he started the company, and the company didn't work, and he closed it. But we look at it as, look, we gave you an opportunity to try something, and we all tried it, and we all did our best. And when we realized it wasn't working, we were honest with each other. And we still have a good relationship with that person. Just didn't work, right? And so I think it's okay to make mistakes, and I think it's okay to be honest about that. And if you do those things, then I think everybody's happy, and nobody's taken off guard if there's a problem. My other example of that would be, just the whole COVID thing. Like, we had put a plan together by department. Like, if revenue goes down to this, we got to furlough these people.
Right.
And then we shared it with everybody, which a lot of people wouldn't do, which is to stay ahead of it and say, hey, here's what's going on. And before we did that, we asked every employee, would you rather know or would you rather not know? And,
what did most people say?
What do you think they would say?
I would say I would want to know.
And that's what they said. Yeah. That's exactly what they said. So that's what we did. We shared the information.
Right. I'm sure that's something that they value a lot. I know most people probably would keep that back, and try and figure things out, on their own. And, to be able to be so open and honest is such a value, to have in a company. How did you get shaped this way over the years? What would you say, who in your life has helped you to create a company like this?
So first and foremost, my three partners, right? So there's myself, and I have three other partners that we've done everything together for 20 years. And so the perspective of four different people making decisions versus one person making decisions, I think, over the years, you start to learn and respect and have the ability to see different viewpoints. And as that happens, you're constantly changing and evolving within the company. And so, I would say that my three partners, number one, and then I would almost guarantee you, if you went to all of them and said, well, who shaped you the most, we would all probably say our parents. Because we've all had parents that have had traumatic business experiences. Almost all of our parents were entrepreneurial, and so we saw the ups and downs of that process. and we're able to say, okay, well, these are the things that are important to us, and these are the things that I think it's important to push down to the people that work with us. And so those would be my two, I think, biggest influences.
What do you define as resilience?
So, so that's a great question. And the easy answer is, hey, you continue to get back up when things don't go the way you wanted. So, in I guess 2008, like I told you, we were in the mortgage business, and we were lending our own money, and we had a big warehouse line of credit, and we would use that, and we would sell all the loans at the end of the month and pay it off. Now, our business at the time was, 85% purchase business with people putting 15% down and 720 credit scores, right? Like we weren't doing, in fact, anybody that ever wanted to do a reverse mortgage or not a reverse mortgage, those what are they called, where you, negative amortization mortgages where your balance was going up, I would call them personally and just say, hey, I want to walk through this loan with you, make sure you understand what this loan is before we give it to you.
Right.
And then most people, of course, would say, yeah, no, I don't want that loan.
Mm-hmm.
So our business was very clean business, but the industry as a whole just, was in turmoil. And so we got a call from our warehouse lender, and they said to us, hey, look, in 2 weeks, you either need to put $5 million in the bank or we're taking your warehouse line away.
Oh my goodness.
And we didn't have $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, all right, well, what are we going to do now? This is a problem. And within 2 weeks, we were able to go to a bank and get them to allow us to operate our business off of their lines of credit because their warehouse lines were so much less expensive and our underwriting was so good.
Right.
So I think it's the idea that when you have these obstacles come up, because they're coming up for everybody, that, you get, a half a day to cry and be upset, and then you have to try and figure out, well, what am I going to do about it? How are we going to deal with this? And there's always a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think it's probably something where it's very much in your favor to have, 3 other partners that you've been working with for so long. And what would you say is the core dynamic that keeps you all together? It's, it can be difficult when you have so many people running one company. What is it that you pride yourselves on and how you're able to work together?
We've always said the same thing, right? Which is, can't be partners if you want to keep score, because there's always going to be a spot where you're the weak link in the organization. And over 20 years, or a little over 20 years, however long it's been, that's happened to each of us where we've been the weak link.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell the story that, when we were in the mortgage business, when we first started getting into real estate, like we told my one partner, Andy, like, you go out and buy properties for us because you're doing the least amount of production in the mortgage company. But at the time, like if I were doing 15 loans and my partner, Gary Rissler, was doing 15 loans and Bill was kind of handling all the operations, Andy was doing half the loans that we were doing. And, you would hear people in your ear going, well, why is Andy getting paid the same amount of money as you are? He's doing half the volume. And we said, because Andy's putting the effort in, and what we care about is effort, because the results will come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then as we start getting him out into construction, what do we find out? Well, Andy's great at construction. And now our construction company is our most profitable entity. So imagine Andy, we're keeping score and cutting Andy's pay. Now Andy would be coming back to us and saying, hey guys, I'm running the most profitable company that we have, and you guys need to all take less.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never done that. We've always said the only thing we care about is effort. And as long as everybody's putting the effort in, we're going to be fine.
Yeah. So how did you all come to define what effort meant to each of you? Because I know with a lot of people, you can say there's always miscommunication when there's not definitions of what something means to someone.
So that is a good question too, because we have learned over the years that what looks like effort, might not be effort, right? So my partner Bill he's a little bit more social in the office, and he's walking around and he's talking to everybody. He wants everybody to be happy. And the way he gets his work done is different than the way, like, I'm a grinder. Like, I'm coming in the morning and I don't want you to talk to me until I feel like I've done everything that's on my list. And so we work differently, but at the end of the day, we kept score the wrong way. We were just watching how many hours we were working, right? Saying, well, that must be effort. And in the beginning, that's what we did. But as we've gotten further along, you know, we use a system now called EOS, which is for smaller companies. It's the Entrepreneur's Operating System. And in there, you can create scorecards. And in the scorecards, now we care about, well, how many tasks did you say you were going to do? And how many of those did you actually get done? So we'll agree on the top priorities for the company, and then we'll assign them to everybody. And, you know, if you know, mine is, by way of example, you know, raise $10 million in equity, and that takes me 4 hours. Well, great. I still raised, you know, that was the most important thing I needed to do that quarter. I got it done. So we're much more results driven now, where in the beginning we were much more effort driven.
Okay. How would you say over the years you've been able to lean into your fears? I mean, being in business for 20 years, I mean, I'm sure there's just been so many moments where, you know, things just go up and down, and especially now. How have you all been able to cope with that and run?
So I had it easier than my other three partners, because when we started working, my wife was making more money than I was, and continues to have a very good job and makes good money. And so I could be way more aggressive, knowing that if things, God forbid, didn't go the way we wanted, I was still going to be able to pay my bills, right? And I tell my wife all the time that, you know, the fact that we work great together because you're not an entrepreneur and would never take the risks that I take, and they have worked out for us long term, but I could never have taken those risks without the stability that you have, right? And so my other three partners didn't have that same ability to do that. So what that meant was I had to sell them way more on the risks that we were going to take,
right?
And hope that I could get them to go along for the ride. And luckily, you know, I was able to do that, and most of the stuff that we did worked out. So now I think we're much more willing to take chances, but the chances are measured. We have reserves. We want to take a chance. We want to start this business. Okay, well, how much money is it going to take? Okay, great. You know, and some of them work and some of them don't work, but we're not taking risks that you can't come back from.
Right.
I would never take a risk now that would put me out of business, right?
Yeah. So with everything that has happened over the past few months, has your goal for where the company is going, has that changed, or are you guys still headed on the same path?
So we revised our budgets. If that's the, you know, as the first question, have we revised our 2020 budgets to coincide with COVID and losing a couple months worth of production? Yes. With that said, is our long-term vision for the company changed at all? No. Other than some things might get accelerated because those pivot points and those opportunities might come up a little quicker than we might have expected. And so if that happens, you know, hopefully all the work that we've done to this point to be prepared will work, and we'll be able to take advantage of some of those things. So if anything, hopefully it accelerates our long-term goals, but we'll see.
What are your long-term goals?
So my long-term goal is not that long-term, right? So I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, my partners and I want to replace ourselves in the development company with the next group of people who will then be taking the risks that we're taking now. And so we get to act as more of an advisory board and more of, you know, capital investors for them, use our money to invest with them, de-risk our position, and continue to move the company forward where the employees are starting to get as much benefit from the passive income as we do. That's the goal.
What's one thing you would be telling the group that would be taking over? What's one piece of advice you would be telling them that to always keep in the back of their mind?
Well, can I give them two?
Yeah, you can go through.
So, one is what I already said to you, which is don't keep score, right? Like if you're going to keep score, then it's never going to work because there will always be a time, again, where you're the weak link. That's number one. And if you can't do that, you're not a partner person. And then therefore, this isn't going to be the right thing for you. Number two, it's always going to take longer than you thought to get your initial traction. So if you think in a year or two you're going to have X, you're probably not going to have it for 5 years. But the reality is what you think you can get done in 10 years, you're going to get way more done in 10 years than what you thought. So that initial ramp up period is way longer than you think. But then once you get past it, that growth is exponential. And that next, 5 to 7 years is significantly more growth than what you would think.
Yeah. Who are the thought leaders that you follow?
So I like Simon Sinek, but he is a little too I don't know the right word to say here, but I think he's a little too much pie in the sky. Like I think there's, I love the message, but I think it's not as practical to use. I love Adam Grant. I think Adam Grant's thoughts are really good. And then Gino Wickman, who's the guy that wrote the book Traction in EOS, that's the system that we're following to create transparency and an efficient operating system for our company. Those are probably the three guys that I'm getting the most from right now.
So tell us about the charity that you're going to support for this episode.
Sure. So before I get to the charity, just one thing, because we were talking about trust and your trusted settlement services. So how do I not mention that, right? So, I mean, I think it's important, right, that the people that you're dealing with are people that you trust. And when you put that in your name, that kind of tells you everything you need to know, right? So from our charity standpoint, we actually have a charity that we started ourselves. And I'll tell you kind of where the idea came from and what we're doing. So I sit on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters. And mentorship is super important to us, and their outcomes for mentorship are just tremendous, right? And one of the things that we saw while we were doing the mentorship is I'm talking to other people that are big brothers, and they're like, "Oh, I'm having a great relationship. Things are going great with my little brother," and then all of a sudden, the kid's no longer around. And we're like, "Well, what's happening?" And what we're starting to find out is that their housing situations are so unstable that they're moving from here to there, and that it's very difficult for kids to get ahead when they don't have a stable house to be in. And so then we started looking at what we do and saying, well, I'm not great at asking people for money, right? So raising money, if I'm on your board, you're not getting that from me. Like, I'll donate, but to 5, 10x that, I'm terrible at that. So what we decided is, well, what are we really good at? We're really good at construction. So what if we could buy some houses and get the work done on them from our subcontractors at cost or sometimes donated for free, and then deliver those houses to families that are in the Big Brother system and start to stabilize their housing and get them out of a situation where they're paying $1,000 a month for a 3-bedroom house that's in really bad shape and into a house that they own that has a $700 payment. And it's brand new, right? How do we do that? And so we created How Charities, and How Charities, that's what we do. We buy houses, we fix them up, and then we sell them to families that are in need. They have equity in them from day one, and we stabilize kind of their payments are less than what they're paying in rent, and really, try and give families, one less thing to worry about. And then, when they're in the house, we don't then just abandon them. We're going to continue on a financial freedom plan with you. So I told the first, Lois, who was our first person that got a house, I told her, my job is to make you a millionaire, right? This is your first step in the process. Don't just stop there. If you have the initiative to have 2 kids and be a single mother and working 2 jobs and still get your kids in the Big Brothers program and still be interested in doing work to own your own house, you should be able to achieve these things.
Mm-hmm.
We just got to get you a stable footing to start from. And so our charity does that. And so we did one house our first year. We did 2 houses our second year. We're hoping to do 5 in our third year. And
Right.
we're just going to keep pushing it forward.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Before we end this, one last question. What would you say you've learned from your employees, your tenants, or clients? What's one thing they've taught you about yourself?
That I'm a bad communicator. And what I that what I think I said and what I actually said aren't necessarily the same thing. And it's good to know, right? Because you think you're so clear with everybody, and when you find out that, you know, visionary people tend to have a lot of ideas and think everybody understands what they're saying. And what I learned is I need to put people in place to protect myself from myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, hey, you gave me these 10 ideas and 9 of them are bad, but this one idea,
Right.
we can do something with that, right? And having that person in your organization is way more important than having 10 of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how many years did it take for you to realize this?
I would say if we've been in business for roughly 20 years, I would say 18.
Yeah. Well, better late than never, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, Gary, thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, absolutely. We'll see you soon.